What up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans? Matty P here with another episode of Steelers War Room on Steelers Touch and Under. Our Steelers War Room series is about putting you in the minds of Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, Mike Tomlin, and the rest of the Steelers front office as they put together a winning roster in 2024 and beyond, and a roster that can compete for a 7th Lombardi trophy. All right, and today we are starting my series off. They will be littering them out across the next week or so of my top 6 to 8 players at each position. There are a couple of positions where I'm going to do 8 players, but generally it's going to be my top 6 players spread across 3 days at each position. And then once we finish all this, I will actually release my top 75 to top 100 overall players in the draft spread across the 3 days. I like to spread it out across 3 days. You want to hear prospects on all 3 days. The Steelers have got picks across all 3 days. There's no point me doing the top 100 best players in the draft. There's plenty of people out there in the NFL media doing that. You want to know who are the prospects that fit what the Steelers want to do. And today, we've talked a lot about tackle, center, O-line recently. I'm going to not kick off the series with that. We are going to do the offense, and then we'll do the defense in that order. But in offense, we are going to kick off with wide receivers. So I'm going to bring them straight up for you. And then we're going to talk through why I'm talking about these players today. All right, so when we look at it, these are my prospects. I'm going to explain why I've ordered them like this. There's going to be names that are missing here that you might have heard of through this draft season, through this draft process. But we're going to talk about a little bit about why each one of them and also what their actual performance was in 2023 in the college football season. All right, so my first guy is Rome Odunze. Why don't I have Marvin Harrison Jr.? Why don't I have Malik Neighbors? Because those two guys are realistically not going to be on the board. Yes, Odunze could be picked before Neighbors, but in my mind, if you're going to trade up to get Odunze, or trade up to a spot to get Odunze, you're doing it to get Odunze. I mean, you're not going to be able to go high enough to get Malik. Marvin Harrison Jr., but you are certainly not going to pick, Neighbors over Odunze. I also don't have Brian Thomas Jr. I could see the Steelers pick him. I really, really could at 20 because I think he'll fall into that 20 range, 20 to 24 range. But I like Adonai Mitchell. I'd prefer the trade back. And someone might trade up to get Brian Thomas Jr. I just think Adonai Mitchell fits a little bit in terms of what the Steelers can do, long-rangey receiver. So they're my day one guys. Now, I then have Malachi Corley there as well for day one. Really, I could put day 1 to 2, and that's what I probably should have done. In hindsight, I have picked some players as we go through these top 6-8 prospects where I've done a day range. I say that because you could see him scrape back in to the first, at the back of the first. I also think over time, when he's played a few seasons in the NFL, I think we're going to look back and say he was worthy of a first-round pick or a day 1 pick. But he probably will be picked early day 2. But if he's picked day 1, you heard it first, it shouldn't be a surprise. Well, I mean, I've been saying that since back in January, but here we go. I then have Jalen Polk. Now, a lot of people will have Jalen Polk, however you want to say it, out of Washington, ahead of Leggett. You'll have Leggett ahead of Polk. You'll have Keon Coleman ahead of Polk. You might have Ian McMillan that played with him ahead of Polk. I really like Jalen Polk. I think he is someone that can make a bunch of catches. I think you can play him almost anywhere all over the field, outside, inside, slot. When I'm talking inside, he can make some big catches. And I just think the idea of pairing him with George Pickens, I'm not saying he can do everything Pickens can do, but he can make a pretty decent amount of similar radius in terms of catches. And I just think for an opposing defense, this would be very hard to scheme against. I mean, if you can get him at the top of the third, you trade up and get him every day of the week. I think he'll be gone in the second round. I do really like Xavier Leggett, the big, I think he's 6'4", 213 pound, a big guy like Keon Coleman. I really like the idea of Leggett out of South Carolina, hugely productive last year as well. We'll talk about that when we go through production across all of them. I do really like Leggett, but there's something when I watch Polk on tape, I just think with an efficient quarterback, and particularly with a Russell Wilson style quarterback throwing, and even a Fields throwing these like off schedule passes. I just like the idea of Polk. Anyway, Ben Leggett would be a great option as well. Again, I think he probably gets drafted ahead of Polk, so it's less like the Steelers get him. But if I'm going Steeler fits and Steeler prospects, these are the guys. This is one of the guys I'm thinking. Keon Coleman, my co-host Shannon White would not probably do a show over again with me if I did not include him in the second round. I didn't include him in this list or include him on the day 3 picks. He has fallen way down the draft boards because of his 40 at the combine where he ran a 4.61. Don't forget Cooper Kupp ran similar speeds. he'll be very pleased. Shannon White will be very pleased I don't have Xavier Worthy in there. So Shannon, you let me know in the comments that I don't have him in there, even though I'm a Texas fan, on any of the days. But quite honestly, I think Keon Coleman will have a really good transition to the NFL. He played really well for Florida State, catching balls from Jordan Travis. Like it's all goodness with Keon Coleman as well. I don't want to talk about the next two guys particularly. Jermaine Burton is someone that I feel has gone completely under the radar in this draft process. Jermaine Burton out of Alabama scored quite a few TDs. I think he's got like 23 across his college career. We'll pull that up in a moment. But a guy that like you see mocked anywhere between like 100 and like 150. He could be a real good option for the Steelers picking 119 in the draft. So I really like the idea of Jermaine Burton, and allows you to go get cornerback, tackle, center really early on in the draft and still get a productive wide receiver. So I do like the idea of Burton in that regard. In the same vein, on day 3, Luke McCaffrey, we know Mike Tomlin likes to go after the brothers of NFL players. Now, I could write a list for you of 20 guys at wide receiver. Probably in this draft, there's probably 12 to 15 guys really that I like, but I could give you a list of 20 guys going right into 6th, 7th, and potential UDFAs that I think could be productive in the NFL. But these are my top 8, and I pick Luke McCaffrey as well because he was a very productive player for Rice last year. As we say, brother, there's the NFL pedigree, the NFL bloodlines. We like the idea of that if you're a Steelers fan. You like the idea of that if you're Mike Tomlin. But I do actually genuinely believe that McCaffrey's performance last year validates him being a probably top 12 to 15 wide receiver. Now, before we go into a couple more stats, and I want you to take those stats in context of why I picked some of these players. I've talked about some of those traits and why, but there's guys I haven't put here. Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I think he's got a great catch radius, but I don't think he's better than Leggett, Polk, or Coleman. And I think on day 3, he's probably not there. Roman Wilson out of Michigan. Don't mind the guy. I think he's pretty good. But again, I'm going to pick those 3 guys I put on day 2 over him every single time if I was Omar Khan and Andy White or Mike Tomlin and the Steelers front office. Same thing goes, I think, in a lot of ways. Lad McConkey's up there, but again, I think Corley and Polk can make those, can do that job. I can go through a bunch of guys, like whether it's Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's kid. I could go through that with we talked about Lad McConkey, Thrash. There's several guys we could talk about here in this mix, but these are the guys I really like. And here's a little bit more why, right? If you look at TDs last year, right, and I haven't picked Troy Franklin because he's a guy a lot of people putting in the first. I think he's a second rounder, but I don't like the body type scares me in the AFC North. Luke McCaffrey, 13 TDs. Rome Odunze, 13 TDs. Jacob Cowling is someone that I almost put on my list. I will say that. He had 13 TDs, but his size, we've kind of got that in Calvin Austin. Adonai Mitchell, 11 TDs. Keon Coleman, 11 TDs. Malachi Corley, 11 TDs. Jalen Polk, 9 TDs. Burton had 8 TDs, but he's been productive over the course of his career in a very stacked at times Bama team. But he was productive in a pretty average Bama team last year. And then as we go down, again, Tez Walker was someone that I could have easily picked as a day 2, day 3 guy. Didn't do that. Didn't like his draft process so far. Leggett had 7 TDs in an unheralded South Carolina offense. And I think that pretty much covers the guys on our list. But if you also look at the receiving grades of these guys, Leggett's up there, Odunze's up there, McCaffrey's up there, Cooley's up there, Burton's up there. So I can go through. all of this for you. But you're seeing guys that were highly productive in their final year of college. Now, when you're productive in your final year of college, and particularly at the skill positions, that generally translates very well to the NFL. Let's take a guy like Malachi Corley. Everyone knows I'm high on him. The guy's had 29 TDs in a 4-year college career. He's had 366 targets. He's caught 70% of his balls for 3,000 yards, or the balls thrown to him. Yards per reception, 11.6. Huge, big plays. You look at that same Luke McCaffrey, 13.2 average yards of reception, 62.4 reception rate, 19 TDs. A little bit less production, which is why he's a day 3 guy. Look at Jermaine Burton, 23 TDs, 5 and 21 when he was at Georgia, 7 at 20 in 2022 when he was at Bama, 8 at Bama last year. Again, a guy with Georgia and Alabama, the guy's got damn pedigree, right? Damn pedigree. 197 targets, 132 receptions, 67%, 2,300 yards. Pretty good from his perspective. He plays a lot in the slot. Malachi Corley, I should have said, is primarily a slot receiver. But slot receiver from Burton, he's played 25% of the snaps in the slot, 74% out wide. Again, a versatile wide receiver. And that's what the Steelers need if they're going to draft a wide receiver, in the fourth round or better this year because of the gaps that exist at the wide receiver position. Ladd McConkey, I should have said as well. He's played 57% in the slot, so that's where he's going to be beneficial for you. I still believe Corley can play out wider, but I would be remiss for me not to talk about that. Leggett, he's definitely, with his size, you're talking about a guy that's probably going to play, quite outside, but if you put him in the slot, at his 215 to 220 pounds, he's gonna have a great time in the slot as well. He's averaged 14.8 yards of reception in college, 113 receptions off 173 targets, 1,600 yards. So it really did come on in his final year, which again, you're drafting this guy of potential. It's why I'm a bit more of a fan of Corley as well. He's played 25.5% in the slot. I will bring up Jalen Polk because I want to talk about his stats a little bit, just because I think Jalen Polk has gone under the radar for Washington, where a lot of people are high on him, on McMillan versus him. He has 18 TDs, 143 receptions off 221 targets for 64.7%. That's pretty good because with Polk, he has played a lot. He's played some really difficult catches in his career. As I said, he's caught a lot of combat catches. He's caught a lot of 50-50 balls, deep balls. Played 68.7% wide versus 31.1% in the slot. But really good yak yardage percentage year in, year out. Low drop rate. Literally 8 drops his entire college career, right? 8 drops for Leggett as well. So you've seen these guys are really good performers. Malachi Corley has more, but he has a lot of short passing, a lot of tight coverage, different style player when you're playing in the slot as well. You're going into the middle of traffic. 8 drops for Luke McCaffrey. So these are really productive wide receivers that don't make mistakes. And that is why I've picked them. Productive in TDs, productive in grades, productive in terms of their catch percentage, productive in yardage. These are Steelers-style players. Most of these guys are versatile or very good at what they do. The other thing, I think Adonai Mitchell showed a lot of potential. Georgia, Texas. I'm a Longhorns fan. If he caught that ball in the end zone there, it would have been a better ball against Washington. The Texas Longhorns almost would have scraped through the college football playoff against Michigan. So I'd like Adonai Mitchell. I think he could be a really good option for the Steelers if he fell at the top of the second round. I wouldn't draft him at 20. I will just say that, whereas I'd trade up and get Romeo Odunze. But you look at these guys, as I said, versatile, physical, fast, good at what they do, solid players, and that's why they're on my list. But you let me know in the comments, have I got it wrong? Is there another wide receiver we should be talking about? Have I misguided faith in terms of which one of these guys the Steelers should get? Do you agree with my picks? Is there a name here that you would love to see in the black and gold next year? You let me know in the comments. I'm Matty P. As always, go Steelers.